Hello and welcome to another episode of Topline Talks, a Mackie Myers podcast hosted by me, Owen Myers.
Me, Ryan Cook.
The aim of the podcast is to bring you inspiring stories from C-suite guests from across a variety of different industries to provide career and talent insights and some nuggets about what goes on in the boardroom. Today, we're absolutely delighted to be joined by Olivier Colinet, who has recently started a CPTO at ThinkProject, who are a private equity-backed SaaS business growing super quick across Europe and globally. So, Olivier, thank you ever so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Great. Good stuff. So just to kick off for viewers, it'd be fantastic to just get a brief summary, which we'll delve into, I'm sure, just about who you are, what your background is. Obviously, the job that you're currently doing, albeit it's very fresh. And then there's quite a few interesting topics we'd love to explore off the back of that.
Sure. So let me say I've been 30 years in technology. I'm a computer scientist by background. Interestingly, I started at the CERN in Geneva, so I used to be a data scientist over there. And very quickly, I was appealed by international environments. And the first company I joined was actually a company in Texas called Trilogy Software, which basically opened me up to how technology could really transform every single business. Sales at the time, but this really applied across industries. And I think this experience really gave me or paved a little bit my career in the sense that I was given opportunities. I was given opportunities to see how software could transform. Think of it as like helping, car dealer or car manufacturers basically selling cars and letting you as a user configure your own car so you could, buy it online. I think this sounded really disruptive. I'm talking, this is 1996. I think that brings us like quite a long time ago. And this experience really gave me the opportunity to see that technology could be very impactful over time. Lucky enough, I joined some large organizations like HP and EMC Documentum. So I learned through document management systems and process management. And I came naturally to search because search was really kind of a compelling point to, basically access to information. Came the opportunity in 2005 to join Google in Europe. So I'm one of the co-founders of Google Cloud in Europe, and I've been through the high scale, high velocity that you would expect from a company like Google. It was extremely interesting. As a first joiner, we had about to do every single thing, and we really kind of created a category on its own, like bringing consumerization of IT to as many enterprise organizations as possible. And as the portfolio evolved, moving into communications and collaboration, software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. So I think it's been extremely enriching from my perspective to see how different kind of software could transform. And the learning for me through this experience has been that I've never seen technology as an enabler, but more as a transformer. And I think people start realizing that technology, especially today with AI, can be first and foremost a disruptor. And Google really gave me this advantage to see how fast transformation could happen and how wide it could happen. So since then, I left Google. I joined also Ernst & Young to advise as part of a financial services organizations, large organizations like banks and insurance companies on their move to cloud. So using cloud but in a regulated environment. And, after a couple of years, I decided to move back to the startup ecosystem. So I joined a delivery company in Spain, which was really growing fast at the time. They went from Series C to Series D, so I stayed with them for 2 years. This was, at the time of COVID. So as you could imagine, online deliveries went, exploded, during this time. So I joined an organization which was basically in complete transformation in terms of refactoring the whole technology stack, rebuilding entirely the technology organization, and also supporting a 3x growth of a business. So it was also a very interesting experience. This led to me deciding to build my own company for a couple of years, which I did, and more recently I decided to join ThinkProject in another industry, which is construction or built asset management.
There's a lot there.
So much to unpack.
We could be here for a couple of hours.
Where do you start? Let's get settled in.
I just wanted to keep it short.
It's marvellous. Look, 1996, right? So and it's so interesting you say about technology being a transformer, which I think actually thinking about where Google was in 2005 and cloud technology now, which I mean, clearly, this is something, but I'm sure at that time, Google as a proposition and having come from HP and others, what was your perception of that when you went in there? And cloud as a proposition, you must have spent a lot of time convincing people that was even going to be a thing.
No, I think entirely, completely. This was exactly the situation at the time. I mean, in two different ways. I mean, search. I came from a world of enterprise software where
Sure.
the more features you had, the better you stood in front of your customers, and it was very disruptive to move to the other end and feel like, no, search should be easy for users, and you can bring the complexity, behind the screen so users can make the best of it. And that was kind of very incompatible at the time in the enterprise software industry. And I think this was the opportunity for me. I could see that, I was an expert on search, and obviously I could understand the complexity and the tuning, all these kind of services which needed to happen to make it efficient and relevant to the industry. And suddenly Google had a different stake of that, thinking, no, it should be easy. We should basically work out the complexity behind the scene and find relevancy, some relevancy capabilities, so people could straight in navigate to the documents they were looking for. So yes, it was disruptive, from that perspective when I joined Google. Second, when we moved to cloud and we started advertising for cloud as a destination, people just felt like we were joking. No one took really seriously. I remember being on stage a few times to really express how we were delivering software as a service capabilities, or how we could eventually host some of the workloads for applications in the cloud, and people were not taking it seriously, thinking, this is only for public kind of activities. It can't be serious. But over time, they realized there were so many differentiators. It made operations so much simpler. It basically naturally set the ground of what good looked like in terms of service availability, in terms of how quickly you could roll out a service in production. That very quickly turned into our advantage that no, speed is what matters. Consumers expect something to be always on. I remember, some large software providers having maintenance, periods, and we were just looking at it like saying, why is that? This is not cloud. And then came, this age of, delivering software through cloud. And people started realizing it wasn't just only a destination, it was also a distribution channel. For me, cloud, that's what it is first. It's the ability to get, better quality of a service. It's the ability to deliver something very fast in a very iterated manner. And it's also the ability to distribute channels, to distribute software very efficiently to a wide range of customers. But again, we had to go through a lot of education, because a lot of customers were used to customize software.
Sure.
As we moved into that space with Google, obviously everyone thought we would be more an SMB player, mid-market player. And very quickly we had to convince, the software quality was actually good enough for the users, that maybe more feature, less was more, as we said, at the time. And, very quickly the mentality has changed, and people realize effectively there could be a better way to deliver, user productivity. And this is where, there was kind of a pinnacle in terms of cloud adoption.
And as a culture, when you think back there, you'd obviously seen cultures in multiple different forms. But what set, again, where you started, HP, and subsequently, what set that apart? And I guess, since leaving Google as well, what cultural experience have you had since then, and what have you taken with you?
Well, I think Google, it's a very open question. I think Google really helped me to think big in everything I do, which is like, don't take any assumption for granted. Everything is, definitely challenge status quo. Technology can, certainly offer new opportunities. And it's this, constructive mindset, like every day is a learning, so you've got to keep on experimenting, see what it does. I think Google was also a very good experience for me in terms of mindset flexibility. So I joined Google as a search expert, but through my career, I went from search to messaging, to collaboration, to almost IT operations when we started selling platform as a service. But all of these technology blocks were always related to potential use cases, and I think my role at the time, as a CTO, technical lead within the Google Cloud team, was really kind of making it real for users or real for customers. And I remember when we came up with capabilities like BigQuery as an example, the ability to crunch troves of data and give like a couple of seconds response felt like unreal for a lot of customers. I remember some telco organizations thinking, well, we've been crunching the same amount of data within 8 or 9 hours to get to the same point, and eventually with like huge cost, capex cost, and seeing something which could do the same within a couple of seconds was just unreal. It wasn't obviously polished. It did a few things really, really well. But I think it was really tying these kind of use cases to the technology and making it real for users, which was really compelling to me. And again, I think my career has always been acting as a bridge in between what technology could offer and what users could do inside the organization. So, I'm a very horizontal player. I've been in different industries. But what I like to do is listening to people, listening to customers, understanding the pains, and trying to see how technology could really help.
Yeah, fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
And how long was it you were with Google?
I spent 12 years with them.
Years,
so I spent 10 years in the UK, in London, and I spent 2 years in San Francisco.
Yeah. Okay. And so, where was the business when you ended up leaving? Where were they in the market at that stage?
So we started getting excited, getting a couple of millions as part of, in our revenue in Europe. And I think when I left, it was more than a 2 billion run rate business.
Yeah.
And I think it's been increasing, exponentially since. If you look at the latest, Google Cloud numbers, you'd be completely struck. And I think this kind of acceleration that you see almost constantly comes from this mindset, this growth mindset. You've got to think like bigger every single time. And I think the founders, Larry and Sergey, and the CEO of the time, Eric Schmidt, definitely brought this kind of mindset across the organization.
When given we are a recruiter, we'll touch on talent a little bit. When you're hiring into your teams, either then or now, how do you go about trying to identify if someone has that growth mindset, i.e., can thrive in that environment versus, will struggle to?
Yeah, I think, again, we wanted to be disruptive at the time. So I think we had you probably have learned of, the multifaceted recruitment process from Google in terms of, the Googliness and, role relevancy and some of the capabilities. I think what we wanted to test at the time was really how flexible are you as a person to learn something new and eventually learn what could be the potential of a new market, a new set of capabilities. We often had a comparison like, would you like this person on the plane if you're about to crash, kind of, projection. We want someone who could be like a MacGyver, someone who could think outside of a box, not just give us what they learned through the university program and, any other experience, but be like, okay, well, this is the situation. Let's bring the best minds around the table and find out what could be a solution. I think also the compelling event at the time was you could be the smartest ever. You could have been, the most successful in the university program and so on. It didn't matter so much because you could not succeed on your own at Google. So you had to kind of, not lobbying probably would be the wrong word, but you had to influence a lot of people to make sure you could progress some of your ideas and you could basically get wood behind the arrow. So I think this is kind of, this kind of gymnastic of your mind, which basically brought Google to the next level. And I think this is something I'm trying, today as part of recruitment, what I'm looking at is people who could think big, people who could build on ideas of others, who are not afraid of change and take change as potentially an opportunity. People who are also very conscious of risk. But, this kind of growth, getting more mindset.
Yeah. Think big is a big one. We had a guest on the other week who also used the analogy of the plane test.
Okay.
Not that it's about to crash, but can you sit next to someone from LA to Heathrow and get through it and be enthused by that. I think it's quite good.
Yeah,
it's quite a good
analogy.
tester, I think.
One thing which to me is important in my career is I don't want to know what tomorrow is going to look like. I want to listen to every single moment and think, what's the opportunity? And I think, I went to Google in a very opportunistic manner. It's, a friend of mine who contacted me from, my first company in Texas, who said, hey, there's this company called Google interested in, potential pre-sales profile. You could be a good fit. This is, just a new division popping up. Which sounded completely outlandish, out of the norm at the time. And I felt like this was really compelling. So I think it's sometimes, looking at the small signals and taking these as opportunities in your career.
We talk a lot with people about how, and your career, you see a significant trajectory at Google, right? But actually, how do those opportunities come about? And actually, when those things arise, there's this whole thing about you can say no once. But actually, when these things arise, how do you take advantage of that? And, part of it's obviously luck, clearly, but be interested to see how these things, not just in Google, but, thereafter, and how you approach those things. Because I think that takes a certain mindset as well, doesn't it?
This might be tied more to my persona than anything else. I'm someone who I get tired very quickly, and I need, I need innovation constantly. I need change. So that keeps my drive a little bit. So one of the reasons after so many years at Google was I've seen the growth, I've seen the early stage. I really enjoyed both sides, which was the initial startup kind of phase. I mean, we were lucky enough to be within the bigger Google and in some way protected versus starting your own company. But this was exactly the same experience as you would guess from a startup. And I was lucky enough to make it through to really learn through the scaling stage. And I enjoyed both because, one was really about customer acquisition and pushing for a new category, pushing for a new set of capabilities. And the other was really about scaling the business, making sure what you've learned could be, transferred to your team, and your team ultimately could be much stronger than you are. And this has been for me really a learning that I enjoyed. But after 12 years, it felt like seen that, done that. Looking for of course, meeting with bigger and bigger customers every single time. But it didn't feel like I had enough enrichment for me to carry on. So I think this is why also, I went after 12 years Google into consultancy, which is absolutely.
How important was that? Because that sticks out as that must have been a real opportunity to see much more of the market.
Well, that was exactly so. In some way, one of my ex-managers at Google was also, joining EY as a technology partner, and basically asked me, "Look, I think there could be a great interest for you to join EY." It wasn't absolutely not on my radar at the time. I was more looking for another product organization, but I think the compelling event was really, as you said, learning another industry, which was financial services, getting access to board, which I'd never done before. I think the highest we could talk to at Google, at least from a Google Cloud perspective, was the CIO.
Okay.
And suddenly I was opened up to CEOs of large banks and many other C-level within the organization. So this was extremely compelling because you see the strategic and how technology at their level could be seen as a transformer. Plus, it was about creating a small entity within EY and basically bringing some very disruptive profiles within the organization to make sure that EY was not only good in terms of market understanding and transforming, but also capable of bringing some of these disruptive technologies in a very regulated environment. So it was, there was a compelling event. I'm an entrepreneur by nature. So for me, starting a new entity and learning something new, these were 2 points which clicked very quickly. But again, when I left EY to go back to startups, people were like, you're crazy. You've been in large organizations, you've had high growth. Now you've got exposure to a lot of board members. It was back to rolling up my sleeves, playing again very close to technology. Not purely advising about technology, but using technologies on a day-to-day and applying transformation. So, if you think about my experience at Google, I advised for 10 years, C-level on how to transform and tackle some of the hindrance of technology transformation. And when I joined the logistics organization in Barcelona, it was like, well, this is now for me to do.
Yeah.
So I've got obviously all the advice which I've been sharing for many years, and now I can see day to day how these play, and it was extremely interesting.
What was the significant difference between going from a Google and EY into a PE environment?
So being part of a PE-backed organization is quite new to me. I really enjoy the benefits of learning from the other, the experiences of other organizations within the portfolio. This, helps us, avoid making the same mistakes, but also learning from signals in the market that we may not have seen. So I really enjoy this kind of, portfolio play, and also it makes, potentially if we were to, take on any partnerships, this partnership not only to apply to us, but potentially to a wider spectrum. So I think there are benefits on both sides for us to learn a lot from the others, and eventually, if we do something well, to basically share this with the wider community. But also, I think the difference to me is like VC is really about market acquisition and
Sure.
basically keeping on building a product. I think PE is about transformation, making sure we don't slow down, we still keep on scaling up. So yeah, it's a different environment. I think it's much more mature and senior in terms of ecosystem for me.
Is it more restricted in terms of that blue sky thinking you were referring to at Google, where they really harness that think big? Whereas is PE a bit more actually, look, this is the lane, we need to crack it, and once we've cracked it,
no, I
wouldn't
see that. Well, no, I don't see that yet. Well, maybe I will, but I don't, because I think they would have not potentially hired me in the first place if they were to be afraid of that. I think the counter to this is there is no place for slowing down, because as PE expectation is going to be increasing and increasing. So no, I think you still have push for keep on thinking big and open new spaces, but protect the customer base at the same time, right? Don't be foolish to do something wrong. So yeah, this is where I would see the difference. But no, it's actually a very exciting environment.
You referenced earlier that you're a technology entrepreneur, like by trade. We've talked a bit about some successes and things like that. Can you share any insights as to any failures that you've had, in your time in getting involved, and sort of the biggest learns from any failures that you've had?
I think probably sometimes underestimating change. So I think getting people on board takes time. I remember when I joined the logistics organization in Spain, my enthusiasm to change the technology stack and get onto a different level wasn't always shared by everyone. And I think I went through a little bit of kind of a mutinery exercise. People rebelling against change, which for sure I underestimated in the first place. I was lucky enough to be keeping steer and keeping the direction and being supported by the CEO. But I think I could have done something better to kind of prepare initially the ground. Again, I think it comes to through understanding the different personalities in your team and just making sure who would be quick to hop on and who would be requiring demonstration or at least some more learnings before making the change.
Yeah, that's a theme we come across quite a lot, actually. I mean, whether you're a finance professional, a technology professional, a marketing professional, a lot of change and transformation is geared towards technology, right? But actually, at the end of that is generally a human, right? And so actually, you can change the process or change the tech stack, but actually, someone who's using it is going to be impacted by it, whether it's a customer or internally. And so it's treading softly around how that's going to impact that person and winning the hearts and minds along the way.
So yes, and I think that's something I learned, through the products we sold, but probably something I'm not always considered properly as a leader. I'll give you some explanation. As we started rolling out software as a service, think Gmail and the whole suite at the time, we very quickly realized it wasn't just a technology play. We really had to advise users on how to use the new tools. The interfaces were quite different, so there was a bit of, there was a disruptive aspect to the software we were selling. So we quickly we quickly realized it wasn't about program management, but we had to spend time with users up front. And there was a new role to be created called change management. And I'm talking 2008, just to put things in context. Of course, now change management would be like,
sure.
we all know the curve, and so on. But in 2008, that wasn't something, well comprehended, at least in the IT industry. So we decided to invest and really understood that we needed more empathy. We needed to understand, every single persona within the organization. And, if you think about selling email, you're not selling email the same way to an assistant, someone you're delegating your emails to a knowledge worker or to, maybe a field worker. So we started analyzing, how would you perceive email as a tool in your day and, what were the key capabilities that you would need. And this really helped us positioning the positive side of a transformation much more than the negative side. I remember, in a large car manufacturer in the UK, as an example, when we started rolling out, collaboration and communication, seeing, users say, hey, I can translate, my email into different language, things are so much easier than they used to using, alternative solutions before. And this is where we started realizing we're having an impact. It's not just about technology. It's not just about migrating emails from one place to the other. It's about, educating users on making the best of a tool. And I think this became a practice in itself. And I think, Google at the time had a really large, we built a large organization to really advise customers on how to do so. And that's something, at the time we shared with partners to keep it consistent. What I mean to tell you from a leadership perspective is you wouldn't, naturally you wouldn't go through the same stage thinking, you'd expect everyone to hop on into the change as you drive it because you're convinced and
passionate about it.
You're passionate about it. That's exactly what it is. And maybe there is a bit of personal analysis to do up front, and maybe you can slightly deviate your trajectory to get everyone on board.
And is that ever done perfectly? I mean, I think, change is not perfection.
I think this is something which is going to be consistent. I mean, today we talk about AI a lot. I think I use AI every single day in different scenarios. Again, you see people like hopping on, the bandwagon, saying, this is going to be great. It keeps, my productivity up. And some others thinking, no, I feel like disrupted. So I think we probably see today, the same, playing again.
Yeah, we do.
At a much wider scale than we've ever seen. And I think we're fighting the same challenges.
I have to say, my favorite comment so far is, Google, why would I want to work for Google? Google, it's like, yeah, bloody hell, yeah. Now, you look at it, but
if you're an average worker in the UK, and you're seeing AI and you're a bit cynical or whatever, you being obviously pro-technology and pro-disruption, what would you say to the average man on the street as to how you can start engaging with AI to see the potential upsides that it could offer?
Yeah, obviously you've got to step away from, the usual hype of technology. As something comes new, everyone wants to hop on and make the best of it. I think for me, AI obviously is like a calculator. When I was young, I could of course, calculate, like anyone else. But, I realized there could be, an advantage to use a calculator next to me because I could do something much more complex and much more visual than I ever did. So for me, AI plays the same. It doesn't replace you, but you could go so much faster, so much quicker. You could get insights which you wouldn't have experienced by yourself. Because the benefit of AI is it plays the same as everyone else. So someone said to me recently, there is no unknown anymore because AI is there to tell us. They can eventually play every single combination, to understand what you're facing. Think of it like the self-driving car. It's kind of the aggregated value of everyone, driving today. AI is potentially the same in every single, at least Gen AI, the same in every single situation. So the question is like, are you changing your way of doing things by thinking, is there a better way for me to do it with AI? And this is kind of a mindset, to change to make these days. So Yeah, I don't want to be foolish and think, AI should do everything, but I think as a person today, I would highly recommend everyone to use it and practice more and more. I think no one is good at it, but everyone has to learn on how to get better and better using
I
it.
like the calculator analogy. I think that's a really good way of.
Yeah, I was just thinking.
Because in the recruitment industry, we go to industry events, and there's people trying to generate AI products, and it's not really, it's automation. But actually framing it as a calculator that you personally use to make yourself more efficient, I think it's quite a good way of summarizing it.
I think that's exactly what it is. And I think, something we're trying to encourage in our organization today is, we're all vulnerable to technology, right? In some way I've been disrupted like everyone else, by AI, because it changes as well as a developer, as a technology leader, what you used to do. But I think you've got to be very humble and saying, look, I've been using AI in this way and it's been extremely efficient to me. And I was, basically just doing that with a colleague yesterday, was telling me, look, I had like an hour review or interview to watch out. And basically, it was on YouTube, and you basically asked the LLM, can you please summarize me this, 1 hour and a half, interview on YouTube, and you got the 3 bullet points in 2 seconds, right? So this is just about efficiency, making the best of the tools that potentially you can tap into. So you've got to be curious and challenging yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
If we move to geography, if we may, and obviously technology more broadly, obviously you know the UK very well. You live here, but I guess in terms of UK versus Europe, and then also versus the US, I think there's still a jostling for position, right, on who plays what. And I'd be interested to get your take on how, again, your experience of it, and obviously, most of our listeners is currently, we've opened up in LA, so we've got viewership in the US and UK particularly. But yeah, interested in your take on how you feel that jostling for position is going and what role you think will be played in the future.
So I've been living in the UK for 14 years. I worked in Spain for 2 years. I lived and worked in the US for 2 years. And obviously I've lived in France before. I think what plays well for me in the UK, and to a certain extent in the US as well, is the open mindset mentality in the UK. So you like experimenting, you like trying something new, and see what value you can get from this new thing. I would say that in the rest of Europe, people are a bit more cautious, probably more, let's wait until we see, what technology, what this could offer. When I think about Europe, and I include, UK as part of Europe, I'd say, this is definitely the place where technology could be the most impactful first. And, obviously it will roll out across Europe afterwards. US is different. I think UK is very much around value, not just tech. I think US, to me, is like tech for tech. In the sense that something comes new, it might be completely, it may not be obvious why it brings value to anyone. It would still be, eventually at least very quickly successful. It might spike and disappear, but you wouldn't get similar behavior in the UK. I think people would be like, okay, why? Why should I use this technology first? But the proof needs to be in the pudding, right?
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, tech for tech. Yeah, I can probably see that.
And a favourite place to live? I mean, obviously you've been in the UK for quite a while now, so that might be the obvious answer. But
no offence taken either, by the way.
No, I definitely love the UK. I love London. For me, it's it's a natural centre of gravity. I love the buzz in London. I also like country, so that's why I live in between 2 countries at the same time.
Absolutely, the benefits of. Is there, if there was one thing, right at the start of the journey where you started before, a computer scientist, if there's one thing you could tell yourself now, all these years on, what would it be?
I think just listen and look at how the community evolves, what could be potential opportunities. I'd know, initially I wasn't even planning to have a degree in computer science. But naturally I came through this and I quite enjoyed, learning computing. I was a signal processing engineer. My major was in signal processing. I think just keep be open to change, be open to anything which could be compelling. I would have loved psychology as much as I loved computer science. So for me, it's just been an opportunity. I grabbed the opportunity and I kept moving on.
It'd be as time's drawing to a close. It'd be really good to spend a bit of time on ThinkProject. I don't know if you could just sort of bring it to life. What is ThinkProject? Where are they in the journey and the proposition?
Yeah, so ThinkProject has been in business for more than 20 years. They're basically one of the leaders in the built asset industry. So they're basically providing software capabilities to support large construction projects as much as large asset management projects. The benefits is they offer solutions to cover the whole life cycle. So you could be starting building a nuclear power plant up to basically managing the nuclear power plant and its operation. So they really cover all different life cycle stages, from planning and construction to operations and decommissioning, which is one of the unique specificity of ThinkProject. It's a growing company, obviously PE-backed by equity. They've been very successful until now, so really excited to working with them and building for the next stage.
And offices and people across the world, right? But mostly Europe and UK.
They've got massive presence in Europe, but also in New Zealand. So we've got an asset management division based out of New Zealand. So we've been very present in APAC. Yes, historically we've been built through acquisitions. Bringing different products under the same umbrella, with large presence in Germany, in France, in the UK. So we basically have a large set of capabilities to offer across the industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And look, throughout your career, and this is dovetails into that whole piece around teams all over the place, and you've carried very large teams, Olivier, across lots of different organisations. But even looking at it now, you've got New Zealand, India, parts of Europe, the UK. Just from a leadership perspective, how easy is it managing not just how geographically disparate they are, but also just how different they are culturally? And what have you learned, and what do you continue to do in order to make sure you're getting the best out of that whole group of people?
So I've been used to manage teams completely remote for many, many years. If you think about Google at the time, coming back to this example, software was being, like Docs, Google Docs was built in New York. Google Drive, Google Maps was built in Australia. So there were capabilities all over the place. Gmail was obviously built in the US. So we had to work and operate daily with teams which were completely spread across the world. And from a customer support standpoint, I covered EMEA at the time. So it went from Israel up to Moscow. So we have every single country being mapped. It ties back to setting objectives, clarity of a vision, where are we heading, what does it mean to you, and what are the key objectives for you to deliver. So basically, it pays back to the strategy as a whole. It's kind of keeping that lineage, and with the ultimate goal of everyone transforming the industry. So there is a think big, aspect of the strategy which is important. So bring it back to ThinkProject. It's the same. I think each region, in my case, has brought very successfully some key assets, key applications. The compelling point for me is now how can we integrate them deeply together? So basically, each of them can bring something much bigger than they were initially brought to build. And I think being part of that journey where everyone understands how their personality can basically build a bigger identity is what really keeps everyone excited. So yeah, I think we have to work across these different countries. I want to make sure that culturally we bring everyone in, so it doesn't feel like we just do activities in Europe and people in New Zealand feel like completely disconnected. So you've got to make sure you're managing this as we one family at the end of the day, but also they're part of a strategy and they're part of a product portfolio. So yeah, ultimately, I'm hoping this is still a new stage for me in my career, but I'm hoping this will be very transparent to all of them.
And finally, linked to that, and I'll make sure my teeth are in for this, as a CPTO, bringing product and technology, and I guess bringing this to life really for listeners, the benefit of having these two married together versus... Just bring that to life for us in terms of, what you found having pulled those two together, and for someone who is aspiring to be across both, what that's like.
I've always seen, the benefits of bringing the two together. Learning from a large organization like Google, I've seen kingdoms, playing against each other. I believe innovation comes everywhere, right? You could have great engineers building great capabilities. You could have great product managers anticipating great, market potentials and green fields. So I think that if you can manage to bring the two together, ultimately you'll get much more than you could, in isolation. I think, as the market evolves, also you realize the product managers not only do have a need to understand the market, be close to their customers, but they need to understand much more technology than they ever did before. So it's not a sequential aspect that, as a product manager, you would identify, a set of use cases, epics and the like for you to build, and then you can pass on to engineering. I think the two has to work very efficiently together. And I think that kind of communion, making sure everything gets shipped properly is really important. So I've seen across my experiences and years, some engineers telling me, look, my code is working, my job is done. And I was like, no, your job is not done until it's in production.
Yeah.
So maybe the DevOps engineer is missing something from you. Maybe the product manager is missing, some coverage. And, I'm just using the engineering example as one, but, the same would play on product management or, product owner. So you've got to make sure everyone is part of a single mindset, and what really matters or what they're being measured on is how much is being launched, in production. Anything else in between is just a stage before you get to production. So getting that kind of mindset that we all together, whatever challenges we're getting, because maybe there is a DevOps bottleneck and something needs to be automated, hasn't been planned before, is kind of the operational gymnastic that needs to be, train and train again.
Sure.
It's a rinse and repeat until it gets to perfection and the team feels like, acting as one. And I think acting as CTPO in that sense really, gives you the benefit that you've got a way to optimize these two set of capabilities. And yes, and there is respect on both sides, right? As much as I understand, product or engineering, you've got to make sure there is space in the sprints for, technical depth, coverage. So you've got to make sure everyone has a seat at the table. But, once it works, it's quite impressive.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, it absolutely makes sense having that point of communion. That's so true.
Yeah, and today, especially in the AI age, I realize more and more, every single role within this kind of team is getting disrupted. So again, having that kind of, communion is really important.
Yeah, communion. Yeah, very good.
Good. Well,
Thank you.
That's a really good point to end on. So thanks ever so much for your insights.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing the ThinkProject journey.
Thank you very much.
Over the next couple of years. But that's a wrap for now. So thanks Olivier for joining us. And for anyone that's not listened before, you can subscribe. We post this on YouTube, on Apple and on Spotify. We've got a few more that we're posting over the next few months. Some really interesting guests. So please tune in and take a listen. But for now, thanks Olivier.
I was delighted. Thank you.
Cheers.